Welcome in. If you are joining us today, you are stepping into the third seat of a highly complex and honestly an incredibly urgent conversation.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm glad you're here with us for this one.
Right. Because today our mission is to unpack what looks like a major structural turning point in Middle Eastern defense dynamics. And to do this, we are looking at a single, highly detailed source.
Specifically, we're diving into a video transcript from the Times of India.
Exactly. A report that outlines this truly unprecedented wave of Iranian missile and drone strikes that have, well, recently swept across Israel and the wider Gulf region.
And it's a dense report. There's a lot of ground to cover.
There is. But before we get into the mechanics, the physics and the sheer scale of all this, I want to make something incredibly clear to you, the listener.
This is an important point.
Yeah, it's crucial. This deep dive is strictly an impartial examination of the facts exactly as they are presented in this specific source material.
Right. We are not here to take political sides.
Not at all. We are not endorsing any of the geopolitical viewpoints, justifications, or narratives contained in the report from any party involved, left or right.
Our only goal today is to help you understand the strategic, the mathematical, and really the human realities of what this specific report lays out.
Exactly. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because the data points we have in front of us represent a fundamental shift in how aerial warfare is actually being conducted.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
Yeah. We are looking at a suspected cluster bomb penetrating central Israel, more than 100 drones heading simultaneously for the United Arab Emirates, and regional air defense networks just being pushed to their absolute brink.
And to truly comprehend the gravity of that data, we really have to look past the political theater and analyze the sheer math of what is happening in the skies.
The math of it.
Yes, the math. We are witnessing a stress test of the very concept of national air defense. The volume of munitions, the geographic spread, the types of warheads deployed.
None of it is haphazard.
Exactly. It is a highly calculated mathematical approach to finding the breaking point of some of the most sophisticated radar and interception grids on the planet.
Well, let's start right at the point of impact, because the report highlights a significant confirmed breach in central Israel's defense shield.
Which is where that theoretical math meets a very grim reality on the ground.
Yeah. According to the Israeli Emergency Services, Megan David Adam, there were at least 6 confirmed injuries from a ballistic missile attack that actually managed to strike central Israel.
And the report gives us very specific details that ground this event.
It does. It mentions a man in his 40s in Tel Aviv suffering serious shrapnel injuries, and another impact site in Petah Tikva that left a 25-year-old man in moderate condition.
But the detail that completely changes the scope of this conversation is the specific type of weapon official suspect was used here.
Right. They believe this ballistic missile was carrying a cluster bomb warhead.
Which represents just a massive tactical complication for any defense grid.
Because it's not just a standard missile anymore.
Right. We know how advanced systems like David's Sling or the Iron Dome operate against unitary warheads.
And for the listener, a unitary warhead is basically just a single solid mass, right?
Exactly. A single mass re-entering the atmosphere. The radar tracks that one incoming trajectory, the computers calculate the optimal interception point, and a kinetic kill vehicle is launched to destroy that single mass before it reaches its target.
Okay, but if you introduce a cluster munition into that equation...
the physics of the interception change entirely.
Because it's no longer just a single mass falling from the sky.
No, it's not.
If we look at the mechanics of a cluster munition as described in the report, it is literally designed to open up midair and scatter explosive fragments across a wide geographic footprint.
It disperses multiple smaller submunitions.
Right. So from a purely technical standpoint, I'm trying to visualize what happens to the defense grid's processing power in that exact moment. I mean, does the system just suddenly see a cloud?
It sees a sudden exponential multiplication of threats. Instead of updating a track file on one ballistic object moving at a predictable velocity, the radar array is instantly hit with dozens, perhaps hundreds, of distinct, smaller objects.
All at once.
All at once. And each of those submunitions has its own radar cross-section, its own terminal velocity, and its own slightly distinct trajectory.
That sounds like a computing nightmare.
It is. The computational power required to instantly generate individual track files for an entire cloud of explosives calculate the threat level of each one, prioritize which ones are heading for populated areas versus open fields, and then assign individual interceptors to each piece of that clap.
I mean, that is an astronomical ask for the algorithms.
It pushes the software to its absolute limits.
Which really explains the chaos on the ground detailed in the report. We aren't just looking at one isolated crater here.
No, the police reported more than a dozen different impact points across central Israel from this specific barrage.
Right, and the source imagery describes damaged streets, shattered windows, debris scattered across a wide area, and rescue units having to literally navigate through smoke-filled neighborhoods just to find survivors.
For emergency responders like King David Adam, you aren't dispatching units to a single site anymore. You are trying to triage an entire grid of a city simultaneously.
It's a nightmare scenario for emergency logistics.
And it forces us to ask the question that the report notes the Israel Defense Forces are actively investigating right now.
Which is, how exactly did this specific missile manage to penetrate the shield in the first place?
Exactly. Israel operates a layered, multi-tiered defense network that is globally recognized for its capability. So examining the failure points becomes critical here.
Was the interception attempted but maybe it failed due to the timing of the cluster dispersion?
That's a very real possibility. If the warhead opens up and releases its submunitions just seconds before the interceptor arrives.
The interceptor might just destroy the empty casing.
Precisely. It destroys the shell while the actual explosives just continue on their path to the ground.
Or, to look at the broader context of the report, we have to ask if the system was simply overwhelmed.
And looking at the timeline of Sunday's attacks, we see a strategy that seems designed to do exactly that.
Yeah, the report states that Iran launched 8 separate missile volleys throughout a single day. 8 volleys.
Spaced out deliberately.
Right. The first wave triggered sirens across northern, central, and southern Israel around 2 a.m. local time. So we have an attack that starts in the middle of the night and continues in waves for hours until a barrage finally breaks through in the afternoon.
It really feels like a kinetic version of a DDoS attack on a computer server.
Okay, that is an incredibly precise analogy. Walk us through that.
Well, a distributed denial of service attack doesn't try to hack the server's core architecture. It simply floods the server with so many simultaneous requests that the processing bandwidth is entirely consumed.
Right, causing the system to crash or just start dropping legitimate traffic.
Exactly. And what we are seeing described in this report is a kinetic DDoS attack.
Yeah.
The strategy relies purely on saturation.
So it's like, okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. It's like a master juggler.
A juggler?
Yeah, think about a defense shield as a master juggler. Juggling 3 balls, or missiles in this case, is flawless. They catch every single one.
Sure.
But juggling 50 balls, launched from different sides of the room, in the dark.
A drop becomes mathematically inevitable.
Exactly. It makes a drop inevitable. But wait, let me play devil's advocate here. If these systems are designed to handle mass barrages, and they successfully shoot down the vast majority of the threats in those first 7 volleys,
Right.
Isn't that proof that the defense shield is actually working exactly as intended? Why should we frame this as a system stretched to the breaking point when the success rates are historically so high?
Because an interception rate is only a snapshot of a single moment in time.
Okay.
The true metric of a saturation attack is the state of the defender's magazine depth over a prolonged period.
Magazine depth, meaning how much ammunition they have left.
Exactly. When we talk about defense drain, we have to look at the logistics and the human element. Every time an interceptor is launched at 2 a.m., that is one less interceptor in the tube for the 4 a.m. wave.
Or the 10 a.m. wave.
Right. And reloading these multi-million-dollar batteries is not an instantaneous process.
It's not just swapping out a clip.
Far from it. It requires physical logistics, heavy machinery, supply chains, and significant downtime for that specific launch unit.
So by spacing it out into 8 volleys over 12 or more hours, the attacker is intentionally dragging out the engagement window.
They are keeping the radar systems painted.
Keeping the threat level at maximum.
And forcing the defender to burn through their inventory of interceptors at a rate faster than they can realistically reload the physical tubes on the ground.
Wow. And we can't ignore the human element in all of this either.
The cognitive load is immense. The algorithms provide the tracking data, yes. But human operators are sitting at those screens.
Making split-second life-or-death decisions.
Exactly. Deciding whether to expend a highly limited, extremely expensive interceptor on a specific radar blip. To sustain that level of hypervigilance continuously from 2 a.m. deep into the afternoon.
It degrades human performance.
Inevitably. The saturation strategy is designed to exhaust the hardware, deplete the ammunition, and break the focus of the operators.
And that exhaustion isn't just limited to the military personnel. The report touches on this psychological and logistical toll on the civilian population, too.
Which is profound.
Imagine being a civilian in this environment. The constant sirens become this grim, relentless routine. You are dragged out of bed at 2 a.m., moving your family into an underground bomb shelter, waiting for the all-clear, only to hear the sirens start up again a few hours later.
You are trapped in a cycle of immediate threat.
Right. The defense shield is ostensibly there to protect not just infrastructure, but a baseline sense of normalcy. And when you are facing 8 volleys in a single day, that normalcy is entirely shattered.
It creates a state of perpetual paralysis for the society. The economic output stops. The supply chains freeze.
Schools close.
The entire societal infrastructure is forced into a holding pattern. And what makes this particular Times of India report so significant is that this paralysis, this saturation strategy, was not confined to a single border.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the scope of the battlefield detailed here is genuinely mind-bending.
It expands massively.
The report outlines a massive geographic spread of these strikes, targeting multiple Gulf countries that currently host American military bases. We are looking at reports of attacks across Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain.
All within the same window of time.
Yes. Let's look at the sheer numbers the report provides for the UAE on Sunday. The UAE detected 17 incoming ballistic missiles. They intercepted 16 of them, with 1 falling into the sea.
A near-perfect interception rate for the ballistic threats.
But that is just the ballistic threat. In addition to those 17 missiles, their air defenses had to engage more than 100 drones approaching the country.
Over 100 drones directed at the UAE in a single day.
It's staggering. If you look at the strategic map, we are witnessing the activation of a truly regional, multi-front aerial war.
The skies across the entire Middle East are essentially saturated with both offensive threats and defensive interceptors.
So let's analyze those numbers for the UAE. Engaging 100 drones and 17 ballistic missiles requires a massive expenditure of defensive resources.
And we really have to consider the economic asymmetry of this exchange.
The cost difference.
Exactly. The drones mentioned in these types of conflicts are often relatively low-cost, mass-produced munitions.
They're cheap to make.
Very cheap. But the interceptors required to shoot them out of the sky reliably, those are highly sophisticated, precision-guided assets that cost exponentially more.
It's the ultimate war of attrition. You force your adversary to fire $1 million missile at a $20,000 drone.
Exactly. And beyond the financial costs, there's the strategic intent behind the targets themselves. You mentioned the drone swarms towards the UAE. The report also highlights that Saudi Arabia shot down 15 drones.
And notably, that included a threat specifically targeting the diplomatic quarter of Riyadh.
Furthermore, the report details a drone attack on fuel tanks at Kuwait's international airport.
Which is a massive escalation in terms of target selection. We aren't just talking about military installations out in the desert somewhere.
No, we are talking about the diplomatic heart of a major regional power and the critical energy and transit infrastructure of another.
This indicates a clear shift toward paralyzing the economic and logistical engines of these nations. I mean, targeting fuel tanks at an international airport in Kuwait is a direct threat to global aviation and energy transit.
And targeting the diplomatic quarter in Riyadh is a very clear message that the geopolitical hubs are not immune.
The pressure placed on these Gulf nations' regional defense systems is immense. If the UAE has to intercept 117 distinct threats in a single day, we have to ask the same logistical questions we asked about Israel's systems.
Right. What does their defensive inventory look like after a week of this?
And how quickly can the global defense supply chain realistically replenish those interceptors? It's a critical vulnerability.
So what does this all mean for you? If you are listening to this right now, perhaps thousands of miles away, why should you care?
It's a vital question.
It matters because this rapidly expanding battlefield is directly intersecting with major international transit hubs and global energy arteries. Dubai, Riyadh, Kuwait, these are massive nodes in the global economy.
They connect everything.
Exactly. This isn't an isolated skirmish. It is a saturation of kinetic violence over some of the most connected, economically vital airspace on the planet. And with hundreds of missiles and drones crisscrossing this airspace simultaneously, the very concept of a successful interception becomes dangerously complicated.
And frankly, quite dangerous on its own.
Yeah.
This raises what is perhaps the most tragic and paradoxical reality detailed in the entire report.
the reality of falling debris.
Exactly. What are the actual consequences of a successful interception? The Times of India transcript provides specific details on regional casualties that force us to confront the physical reality of aerial warfare. In Kuwait, the report notes that 2 border guards were killed while on duty, though the exact circumstances around that remain unclear in the text.
But the details from Dubai and Bahrain explicitly highlight the collateral damage caused by the defense systems themselves.
The story from Dubai is the one that really forces you to pause. The report states that a Pakistani driver was killed in Dubai by falling debris from an aerial interception.
It's a devastating detail.
Think about the layers of that tragedy for a second. This is an expatriate worker, likely hundreds or thousands of miles from his home, driving a vehicle in a city that is globally marketed as a safe, futuristic hub of international commerce.
He is going about his daily work.
And he is killed because a defense system successfully blew up a weapon high above him. It brutally humanizes this massive geopolitical chess match.
It illustrates a terrifying point that we often overlook. Blowing up a drone or a missile in the sky does not make the threat magically disappear.
It doesn't just vanish into a video game puff of smoke.
No. It is a fundamental law of physics.
Yeah.
Conservation of mass and kinetic energy.
Right.
When a sophisticated air defense system intercepts a ballistic missile at high altitude, the public often imagines the threat vaporizing in a flash of light. That is a myth.
The interceptor actually shatters the incoming weapon.
It shatters it into thousands of pieces of jagged metal, electronics, and potentially unexploded fuel or ordnance.
And those pieces still have momentum.
Exactly. They do not vanish. They become high-velocity shrapnel, subject to gravity and terminal velocity, raining down over whatever populated area happens to be beneath the interception point.
So we are essentially looking at a scenario where a 95% interception rate is still generating a massive, deadly hazard on the ground.
The defense system did its job perfectly.
It calculated the trajectory, launched the countermeasure, and prevented the warhead from detonating on its intended target.
But the kinetic energy of that weapon still has to go somewhere.
That is the deadly paradox of modern air defense in dense urban environments. Even a perfectly executed interception creates a shower of deadly debris,
The report also mentions that missile debris fell over parts of Bahrain.
wounding several people and causing infrastructure damage.
It proves that in a saturation war of this scale, the concept of a safe zone beneath contested airspace simply ceases to exist.
If the skies are filled with hundreds of threats and hundreds of interceptors, the fallout footprint covers entire cities, regardless of where the actual intended targets were.
Exactly.
The human cost of the falling debris, the infrastructural damage, the sheer mathematical exhaustion of these multi-billion-dollar defense grids across multiple countries.
It naturally leads you to ask,
What is the driving force behind this unprecedented regional escalation? I mean, why push the entire Middle East to the absolute brink in a single weekend?
and the Times of India report provides some crucial context here by presenting the direct statements from Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian.
And the rhetoric is incredibly intense.
Analyzing the diplomatic and political messaging alongside the kinetic military action is absolutely essential to understanding the trajectory of this conflict.
According to the transcript, President Pezeshkian issued severe warnings. He stated that Iran, quote, would not back down in the face of what he described as aggression.
He explicitly noted that the more pressure Iran faces, the more forcefully it will respond.
But then, almost in the exact same breath, the report notes his insistence that Iran is not seeking conflict with neighboring Arab states.
Which is fascinating.
Let's play devil's advocate here. How does a nation's leadership claim they are actively avoiding conflict with Arab states, while simultaneously launching more than 100 drones toward the United Arab Emirates and sending strike vehicles toward the diplomatic quarter of Saudi Arabia?
It is a profound demonstration of the dissonance between public diplomatic rhetoric and military reality on the ground.
It's totally contradictory.
This type of dual messaging is a classic hallmark of complex geopolitical maneuvering.
Okay, unpack that for us.
While the statement claiming Iran is not seeking conflict with neighboring Arab states is likely aimed at an international diplomatic audience, perhaps the UN or global trade partners.
To maintain a veneer of restraint.
Exactly. To portray their actions as purely defensive or reactionary. However, the kinetic action, the launching of hundreds of munitions at the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait,
That is communicating a very different, highly aggressive message directly to the leadership of those specific Arab states.
it's signaling capability and intent, regardless of the diplomatic phrasing.
It's essentially saying, we can overwhelm your airspace at will, regardless of the American military bases you host.
Yes. But the report also outlines the other side of this equation, noting that Israel and its allies continue to strike Iranian targets in response to these barrages.
Which brings us to the core danger highlighted in the text, the deeply entrenched action-reaction cycle.
In geopolitics, when deterrence fails, it is often replaced by a self-sustaining loop of escalation.
One side launches a saturation attack to establish dominance.
The other side feels compelled to launch a counterstrike of equal or greater magnitude to reestablish deterrence.
And the report explicitly notes the fears that this widening scope of strikes could spiral into a much broader regional war.
The momentum is incredibly concerning.
We have world leaders from across the globe urging restraint. But looking at the data in this report, the momentum of the conflict appears to be moving in the exact opposite direction.
Iran's president is stating that more pressure will lead to more forceful responses.
Israel is vowing to respond to the central Israel strikes.
Gulf nations are suddenly finding their airspace saturated with drones.
It creates a terrifying feedback loop. You hit me, I have to hit you harder to prove I can't be hit, so you respond to my response. It really makes you wonder, what is the actual breaking point of a cycle like this?
It's a question of sustainability.
How long can a region sustain this level of high-alert, high-intensity warfare before the entire system, both the military hardware and the diplomatic architecture, just snaps?
The breaking point may not be a single, dramatic, catastrophic explosion.
What does it look like then?
History suggests that in these types of asymmetric saturation conflicts, the breaking point is often a slow, grinding exhaustion of resources.
Like we talked about with the interceptors.
Exactly. It is the moment when an air defense battery finally runs out of interceptors and a critical piece of infrastructure is completely destroyed.
Or it's the moment when the economic toll of constant airspace closures and damaged transit hubs becomes politically unbearable for the nations caught in the crossfire.
The transcript makes it very clear that we are in one of the most dangerous phases of this dynamic right now.
Precisely because the parameters of engagement are expanding so rapidly.
Pulling in more sovereign nations, more contested airspace, and tragically, more civilian populations.
It is an immense amount of heavy, complex information to process. So let's pull all these disparate threads together.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We really have. We started this deep dive looking at a suspected cluster bomb tearing through central Israel, creating an absolute nightmare scenario for emergency responders, and leaving civilians wounded in Tel Aviv and Petah Tikva.
We tracked the math and physics of how a strategy of pure saturation 8 separate missile volleys over a single day is designed to systematically exhaust the computational limits and the magazine depth of some of the most sophisticated air defense systems on Earth.
We watched the battlefield expand massively across the Gulf, with over 100 drones swarming toward the UAE, and critical energy and diplomatic infrastructure targeted in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia.
And we confronted the tragic physical paradox of interception, where the laws of physics dictate that falling debris from a successful defense still claims lives.
Like the Pakistani driver in Dubai, proving that collateral damage falls from the sky regardless of borders or intent.
I want to sincerely thank you, the listener, for taking the time to untangle such a dense, rapidly evolving, and mathematically complex situation with us.
It's not easy material.
No, it's not. But when the news cycle feels this overwhelming and the geopolitical stakes are this undeniably high, your capacity for critical thinking is your absolute best tool. Taking the time to understand the mechanisms behind the headlines, the physics of radar tracking, the strategic logic of a kinetic DDoS attack, the dual nature of diplomatic rhetoric, and the unavoidable human cost of falling debris.
That is how you navigate an increasingly complex world.
It really is.
I couldn't agree more. And as a quick final reminder, every single piece of information, every data point regarding the casualties, the numbers of drones and missiles, and every quote we explored today was drawn directly from the Times of India video transcript.
We stuck entirely to the source material.
We did. Our aim today was simply to illuminate the facts, the physics, and the military strategies at play in that specific report without taking any political sides. We just want to give you the clarity and the context you need to understand the true scale of what is happening in the skies over the Middle East.
And before we go, I will leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over as you step back into your day.
Let's hear it.
If modern defense systems are successfully intercepting 90 to 95% of incoming threats, historically that sounds like a miraculous technological victory.
It sounds like a total success.
But in a war governed by pure numbers, If an attacker sends 1,000 relatively cheap, mass-produced drones, and the defender successfully shoots down 950 of them.
50 still get through.
Exactly, 50 still get through. As this conflict increasingly becomes a test of sheer volume and endurance, we have to ask a very difficult, very pragmatic question.
What happens to a region when the financial and logistical cost of defending the sky finally outpaces the cost of filling it with fire?
That is the ultimate question.
That is a deeply unsettling yet absolutely essential question, and it's one that's going to stick with me. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep asking the hard questions, stay curious, and always keep seeking the bigger picture.